Okay, this is the short little notes here, the little video, I guess it's more notes than video, about the Age of Metternich or the Congress of Vienna. So this is the information that you need to know for the quiz that you'll be taking in the next couple of days. So remember, your group each takes your own quiz by themselves on the notes that I'm going to give you right now in the next 10 minutes or so. You need to get a 7 or better individually before the group moves on to the next part of the project. So these are the notes. You should take these notes. You should listen to these notes. You can re-listen to this as many times as you want to. Take the quiz, listen to it at the same time. Doesn't really bother me. Just get the information right. Remember, you have to get a 7 out of 10 to pass before you can move on. If you say, I'm just going to get them all, I'm just going to guess the first time, look at the questions, then figure it out after that, and you retest and get a 10, I'm not giving you higher than an 8. Okay, so it's worth your time if you want to get a 9 or a 10 to try the first time. All right, so the Congress of Vienna is the peace treaty meeting where the big powers in Europe get together to figure out how can we make sure we never get another Napoleon. Remember, Napoleon is a product of the French Revolution, and the French Revolution had a lot of people slaughtered in France, but you also had Europe in total war. So the European powers, which I will show you here in a second, actually those are the powers that you are for your project. They get together and they try to come up with a plan for how to make sure this never happens again. So it's also known as the Age of Metternich because Metternich is the guy that will dominate. He is the Austrian guy that will dominate this whole time period. Okay, so the Age of Metternich, the Congress of Vienna starts in 1815 and it's called the Age of Metternich from 1815 until 1848. All right, so what is meant by Congress? Okay, the Congress system is how Europeans got together to settle issues. What that means is they get together and they talk about it. So like our Congress, the House or the Senate, or in Wisconsin, the Assembly and the Senate, they get together and they talk about what are we going to do? So this is a chance for everyone to meet, everyone to discuss, everyone to voice an opinion. And by everyone, I just mean the big important countries. So you should remember George III of France. I don't have this on a slide, so this is a good thing to write down. George III of England, not France. Francis II of Austria. Frederick William III of Prussia. And Alexander I of Russia. For France, it's Bishop Talleyrand. Bishop being in charge of the Catholic Church, and Talleyrand is just his goofy last name. So Bishop Talleyrand represents France, and the other four that I talked about, Alexander I of Russia, George III of England, Frederick William III of Prussia, and Francis II of Austria, they get together in what's called the Congress system, where they get together and they discuss the future plans. There's congresses throughout the 1800s. That's just how Europe did it. The Congress of Vienna's goal, as I said previously just a minute ago, was to deal with the aftermath of Napoleon. What I mean by that is Napoleon just wreaked havoc on Europe. Remember our last quiz. Remember the map. Remember how he has his brothers running Spain and parts of Italy and parts of Belgium and places to the north. And then the Austrians, the Prussians, and the Russians are forced to be allied with them. Pretty much all of Europe was under his control. France was bigger. So everybody in Europe, that is, in Europe was under his control except for the British. So at the Congress of Vienna here in 1815, they get together to come up with a plan to make sure we don't get a guy like that again. And it's key to remember that he came to power as a result of the French Revolution. The French Revolution is really the biggest problem for these people being the leaders that I've mentioned twice now at the Congress of Vienna. They don't like the liberal ideas that came about in the French Revolution because they thought that would lead to them losing power. What's their proof? Louis XVI gets his head chopped off. So if liberalism leads to revolution, which leads to the king getting his heads chopped off, we're out. We don't want it. So at the Congress of Vienna, they have three main goals. And the next slide will give you geographical examples of how they achieve that. The first thing is buffer zones, meaning the area around France is protected. It's got land that if the French decide to attack again, these buffer zones will hopefully slow them down. Switzerland is a buffer zone, kind of an interesting one I'll talk about here in a second. Obviously, you go to the west, you have the English Channel. And so the east, north, and south all need buffer zones. The south, you actually have the Pyrenees, and over to the east a little bit, the Alps. So that's enough of a buffer zone. So you just have to deal with the north and then the eastern borders of France because of the channel on the west. All right, balance of power. We don't want one country to be stronger than the other. That's what Napoleon was. And the third one is legitimate. They didn't see Napoleon as a legitimate ruler. The Bourbons, the Bourbon family, Bourbons, the Bourbon families, they're the ones that was considered legit. Their family had always run France. They're legit. That's what we need. So all those people, the George III, the Francis II, all those people I mentioned, Alexander I, they all were viewed as legitimate because they were conservative hereditary rulers. So these are the three goals of the Congress of Vienna. All right, Metternich is the man you need to remember. This is his name, Klemens von Metternich, and that's his picture on the right. He is an Austrian. Austria and Metternich and Francis II are the key to this whole thing. They have the most to lose. So the Austrian Metternich is the advisor to the king. He's a son of a noble. He fears that the French Revolution destroyed nobility and wreaked havoc on Europe. It inspired nationalism, and both of those things, nationalism and destroying nobles, would ruin him and his country. So his ideas dominate. He takes charge. He says, this is what we got to do. This is how we got to do it. This is what's got to happen. And the rest of those Russians and Prussians and British all buy in with him. So Metternich is a noble from Austria who fears the end of his type of world if the French Revolution spreads. If he's more worried about the French Revolution than he is Napoleon. If these ideas spread, he fears his world will be destroyed, and rightly so. Okay, so Metternich's greatest fear, liberalism. He is afraid of liberalism because it was, I just tried to explain, will destroy Austria. Liberalism, you should remember, means change. And change is getting rid of the old. The old was nobles have power, conservatives run the show, monarchs tell people what to do, and that's what he liked. Liberalism, change, would ruin his Austria. The other part of liberalism that he feared is nationalism. Liberalism and nationalism go hand in hand. And so he fears the two of them. If those two things happen, he is going to be upset. All right? And so that's what he is going to have to worry about. All right? So that's his biggest fear. So this is what they achieve. This is what they achieve. So what do they achieve here at the Congress of Vienna? All right, the map on the right is my way of helping you understand that. Okay, there are 6 different key aspects to what they do. And remember the previous slide, the balance of power, buffer zones. Okay, so this is what they do. The first thing they do, and I don't know if you can see this little arrow moving here, I think you can. The Austrian Netherlands, well, they obviously used to be Austrian. Well, they are given to the Dutch. So now this area here is a big area. That's going to be a balance of power move because the Dutch are now stronger. They got more land. It's also a bit of a buffer zone because this land can be, used as protection for the Dutch, who they really care about. So the Dutch just got stronger, so now we got to weaken them a little bit because we don't want them to be too strong. So South Africa, the colony, is given to the British. Well, the Austrians gave up the Netherlands, so it's not fair to them to lose something, so they're given Venice over here in the pink. The Rhineland is kind of this area right here. I don't know if you can see it between this kind of teal colored and yellow color. That is a demilitarized, it's a buffer zone, meaning that these people here aren't really French, there aren't really Germans. If the French want to attack, they should be able to defend themselves, and that'll buy Prussia time. Russia will get part of Poland, and the most interesting one is Switzerland. The country of Switzerland right here is created. It used to be part of the Holy Roman Empire, but it was never its own country. The cool thing about this is it's created, and its constitution is written up so that Switzerland has to stay neutral. That is true to this day. So these big countries that I'd mentioned numerous times now, the Russians, the Prussians, the French, the British, and the Austrians get together and they say, Switzerland, you're a country, you're independent, do whatever you need to do, you just can't join in wars on any side. If anybody invades Switzerland, everybody else in the rest of Europe comes to their aid. The countries that aren't important, Spain and Italy. They're taking part of Italy, they could care less about Spain. That's how poor, not really poor, I guess, but how lacking in power that they really were. All right, so this is what they achieved. This is how they achieved their goals of buffer zones and balance of power. All right, and as I said before, Metternich, who's from Austria here, fears nationalism. He thinks that liberalism and nationalism go hand in hand. And if you look in this map of Austria, you can see why he's afraid. Austria is not just Austria. It's Hungarians. Down here, it's Croatians and Slovenians. Up here, it's Czechs and Slovaks and Germans. If nationalism, or the pride in your country, kicks in, Austria will be ruined. So Metternich dominates this peace conference by trying to end liberalism because he thinks liberalism and nationalism go hand in hand. All right? So what you need to remember real quick, I got about a minute here, is the Industrial Revolution is also happening in the 1850s while Metternich is trying to crush liberalism. Well, industrialization is change. Change is liberal. Liberalism is what Metternich fears. And all these new isms like socialism, communism, Marxism, they are all going to benefit the worker. Why? Because the workers are having really, really difficult times in this industrial world. In our world today, there's workers' rights and there's legislation, minimum wage pay, all that kind of stuff to protect the worker. They did not have that here. When they build the first factories, they make everybody, including kids, work. They're exploited, they're taken advantage of, the kids die, the people die, they're overworked. It's really, really difficult. So these isms, socialism, communism, Marxism, all those kind of stuff, are going to be a problem for Metternich because they're changes that he doesn't want to stop. You want to be industrialized because it makes you more money. So Metternich's in a tough spot. I want to industrialize to be powerful and rich, but I don't like the workers' rights that go with it because the workers are being treated pretty crappy. So Metternich's going to try as hard as he can to guarantee his protection. And there's two things. The Holy Alliance is this map. These three countries ally together to try to protect the spread of liberalism, and he also issues the Carlsbad Decrees. These are kind of funny because if you think about today's world, the most liberal things today are newspapers or the media and universities. And the Carlsbad Decrees regulated both, censored the newspapers and spied on universities to make sure they weren't spreading liberal ideas. So these are two ways that he tried to guarantee his work to protect his goals at the Congress of Vienna and to make sure that liberalism didn't spread. All right, hopefully this works. Hopefully this makes sense.